Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, I want to wish you all a happy July 4th. We're going to do, since this is pre-recorded, more NFL offseason content for today and tomorrow. So we'll get through all four teams in the NFC South. Today, we'll go over the Panthers. We'll go over their offseason. We'll go over their season coming up. We'll take a look at everything that we expect out of them. And then we will also go over the New Orleans Saints in today's episode, going over their offseason and what we expect to see in a preview of their season coming up. And then since it is July 4th, we had to have a special segment. We're going to end off our show today going over the hot dog eating contest drama with, Kobayashi and Joey Chestnut. They're going to have a special on Netflix. We're going to talk all about that and why neither of them are competing in Nathan's hot dog eating contest this season. So stick around for that at the end. But before we get into the Carolina Panthers, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you'd like to ask, throw it in the chat. I'll get to it as soon as I can. Just remember, once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. I appreciate all of you guys tuning in, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful July 4th Thursday. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today going over the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are our first subject in the NFC South today. They are coming off an abysmal season, a season where they had the number one overall pick due to a trade, and they gave it away to the Bears, who we'll get to soon. I believe that's next week. We'll go over the NFC North. But they're here. They have had an interesting offseason. It's tough to build off of having the worst season in the league without having that number one overall pick. But I'd say they did an okay job. We'll give them a grade here. We'll start off with the draft. They trade up in the first round and trade up into the first round. Draft Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. That is a really good pick, I think, so far. So they start off good. Then in the second, they grab Jonathan Brooks, the first running back off board out of Texas. Third round, they get Trayvon Wallace from Kentucky, the linebacker. Then they grab a tight end in the fourth, Jatavion Sanders, who might have a big role to play this offseason with Hayden Hurst leaving in free agency. So a solid draft class overall. I really like Xavier Legette. I think a position of need, trading up and getting a guy giving you that fifth-year option. I really like that move. Way to be aggressive for a team that needed receiver. We've talked about that. They bring in Adam Thielen last year, and he did pretty solid. But, he's not. He's a little older, and he's not going to be that wide receiver one that you want. As far as free agency goes, they lost a couple pieces, but, overall, I thought they did a solid job. They traded away Brian Burns to the Giants, and that is a tough move. He wanted to get paid and they weren't going to pay him. But to replace him, they bring in Jadeveon Clowney. They bring in Jadeveon Clowney. They bring in Clavon Chason, DJ Wano. Jadeveon Clowney obviously was a top pick in the draft about 10 years ago. He's been a little disappointing as far as his career goes, but he's always been solid getting pressure, even if he doesn't get the sack numbers. Clavon Chason has high upside. They get him on a cheap 1-year deal as well. And in the linebacker spot, they bring in Josie Jewell. That's a spot that I think they really lost on the most. They lose Frankie Louvu and Grieger Hill. Frankie Louvu's a guy that was like a tackling machine, and I really like the pickup there for the Commanders. They're going to struggle a little bit on the inside running the ball. You talk about a team that has not the greatest depth on the interior defensive line. You have on that interior defensive line A'Shawn Robinson they pick up, and Shai Tuttle, who solid run defender. But the run is going to be is going to be a part of this defense. Is going to need some work. They bring in, they make a trade. They trade away they trade for Deontay Johnson defensively. Give up excuse me. Trade for Deontay Johnson in a trade with the Steelers that I think they killed. They gave up Dante Jackson, who was kind of bad. As opposed, and their secondary still needs some work, right? Their secondary is not an elite secondary, especially after losing both safeties to free agency. Although I thought they did a pretty solid job of filling that in, going and getting Jordan Fuller, Xavier Woods, Nick Scott. This defense is going to be bad. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. They lost their best defensive player in Brian Burns. The only reason that defense was even kind of okay. And maybe there's a chance that the secondary becomes kind of what the upside. This secondary could be good. It's a very young secondary, very unproven, but this secondary is a secondary that could end up being a very good unit there in the NFL. As far as the offense goes, we talk about the draft, right? They brought in Xavier Legette to put alongside Adam Thielen and trade for Deontay Johnson. The running back room is crowded. You have returning Chuba Hubbard, you draft Jonathan Brooks, and you bring in you still have Miles Sanders, who you brought in last year. You also bring in Rashad Penny. That's a lot of people to feed, and they're just gonna give it to the hot hand. It seems like right now it looks like Chuba Hubbard is that guy, but I could absolutely see any of those four backs becoming the number one option in Carolina as this season goes on. The offensive line was awful. It was awful last season. It really was. And that's one of the reasons why Bryce Young struggled so much. They did a solid job, and that's where they spent a lot of their money, bringing in guys like Robert Hunt from the Dolphins. I really, really like that pickup for them. Damian Lewis as well, an offensive tackle, getting Yosh Nijman. This is a team that, some of those guys are going to be more backups, but if Ike Ekwonu can become the guy that if he can get that potential, the reason they drafted him in the top 10, this offensive line could improve. This is not going to be a good Panthers team. Bryce Young needs to take that step up. They finally got him the offensive weapons. Jatavion Sanders is probably going to be that tight end one, although he's more of a blocking tight end than a receiving tight end. They bring Andy Dalton back as a backup. He's had a little bit of success in the Panthers uniforms, but this is not going to be a good team. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. This is not going to be a very good Panthers team. This is a Panthers team that is going to struggle this season, but this is a season not really about making the playoffs if you're the Panthers. This is a season, if you're the Panthers, to show improvement. You talk about a Panthers team that, last year was awful. They were the worst team in the league, obviously. But now they have the opportunity to build on it. Have Bryce Young show you what it is, why he was number one overall in that draft. And I think as long as the offensive line is improved, like I said, I really love the addition of Robert Hunt. But as long as that offensive line is improved, they might be okay. Now, we'll go over their schedule in a second, actually, in our next segment. So stick around for that. But this is a team that improved this offseason. Again, they lost some key pieces defensively. I really liked Jeremy Chin, and I really liked Frankie Louvu, but they're both gone. That secondary is going to be a bit of an issue. But the run defense with Derek Brown, Ashawn Robinson, and Shai Tuttle, as long as they don't get past that first unit, should be fine. I'm a little worried about the linebackers. And I think, like I said, this secondary has a chance to be good. It's not going to start good. It's just going to be, hey, if any of these guys develop. Dane Jackson is a guy that might be able to develop. And then, the Troy Hill as Nickelback is one that could turn out well. But this is not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. There's a reason that they had the number one overall pick in the draft last season. And in our next segment, we will go over everything with their season. We'll give them a record. I'm going to give their off-season grade I'm going to give them a C-. Again, I think they got, or not a C-. That's too rough. I'm going to give them a C+. Again, I don't think they got too much better, but they did a good job of filling positions of need and sacrificing where they could. This is a team that doesn't expect to compete, so I really do like what they did this offseason, but it's not going to show results immediately. So if that's what you're looking for in the Panthers, I got bad news for you. You're not going to see that. But I do think that this Panthers team has you can see the path to the future with the way that this roster has started to be built. And we will go over the beginning of that future this season, how Bryce Young will do in 2024-2025 year, coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the Panthers. We've just gone over what they did in the offseason, gave them a grade. I gave them a C+. I know they lost a lot of big names, but they did a good job filling in the offensive line. They had a really nice trade fleecing the Steelers for Deontay Johnson, I thought, and I like their draft a lot. So I'm going to give them a C+ here, room for improvement. And this is, again, we'll go over their season here. I don't expect it to go from the number one overall pick to a playoff spot, but I do like the direction that they are heading in with some of their pickups. In this segment, we are going to go over their entire schedule. Game 1 to 18, give them a win or loss in each game, talk about it a little bit, and we are going to give them a record at the end and whether or not they will make the playoffs. So stick around for that. Before we get into the record prediction, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments in the chat. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, or I guess this is Thursday, July 4th here. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Panthers and their schedule prediction here. So why don't we start off right where we need to in week 1. Week 1 starts off the season against division opponent, the New Orleans Saints. This is going to be in the Superdome. Again, both of these teams had interesting offseason. We're going to talk about the Saints in the next segment. So here's a little bit of a preview for them. I have the Panthers losing this first game. It is in the Superdome. Bunch of rookies, a bunch of young guys that they're counting on. That defense is not going to be very good, and I think that Derek Carr is going to be able to take advantage of that and give the Panthers the start an 0-1 to this season. Then they go home, first game of the year, and they take on the Chargers. And you might say, Jeremy, this seems like an easy win, but the Chargers have to travel cross country, and that's going to suck for them, right? They're coming off, a tough game in the beginning in the first week of their season, and I'm not convinced with their weapons offensively. Now, is that going to matter too much against a not great Carolina defense? Maybe not, but this game screams shootout, and I think, at least to me, it does. As long as I think we could get a Bryce Young legacy game here, and I think the Panthers are going to take this one, improve to 1-1 on the year. Then they have their own cross country flight of their own. They go over to the Raiders in Las Vegas here. And again, that cross-country flight is going to be brutal. They're coming off a high of beating a Justin Herbert-led Chargers team, and I think they're going to drop this one. I don't know who's going to start for the Raiders. My best guess is Gardner Minshew, but maybe they like Aiden O'Connell. But I think the Raiders will be able to take this game from the Panthers. Their weapons are just too good for those secondary guys to deal with. Then it doesn't really get any easier. They go to take on the Bengals, the healthy Bengals team, and these fourth place schedules are not fun because they have to take on the Bengals. That's not a fun thing to do. They're going to lose that game. Not particularly close either. They fall to 1-3 on the early season. And then we get a fun matchup. They go to Chicago. They get Bryce Young versus Caleb Williams, a battle of the number 1 overall picks. As much as I went back and forth on this game. There were a few games that I went back and forth on this one. I'm taking Caleb Williams and the Bears in this one. It's one of those that is, could go either way, but I believe in this Bears team. I think I love what they've done this offseason with with the defense, with the offense bringing in all these weapons for Caleb Williams to build around him. And I think the Bears are going to take care of business at home against the Panthers. So the Panthers, 3-game losing streak, fall to 1-4 on the year, coming back home to take on the Atlanta Falcons. And the Atlanta Falcons are interesting, right? It's hard to give them a 100% grade because we don't know what Kirk Cousins is going to be like. And they've had an interesting offseason. We'll talk about that tomorrow, actually. But the Panthers, I'm giving them a win here. At home, division opponent. I think they're good enough to split this series. That's what I tend to do here on my schedule predictions. I'm giving this one to the Panthers. They improve to 2-4 on the year. Then they head up to DC, play the Commanders, and I really love what the Commanders did this offseason. They stole Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin from the Panthers, and I think those are two pieces that the Panthers are sorely going to miss this season. I have the Commanders taking this game as well, so the Panthers fall now to 2-5 on the year. Week 8 rolls around. They're going to Denver, and I think the Broncos might be the worst team in the league this season. I have them losing to the Panthers here. I don't love their quarterback situation at all. We'll get to the Broncos later, but the Panthers will take care of business here. And then they get the Saints. Again, another preview of the Saints matchup. I have them taking this one at home against the Saints. Some improvement shown here from week 1 to week 9, and I think they'll be able to pull out a tight victory here against the Saints. So that's a nice little 2-game winning streak there. You know, you improve to 4-5 on the year, and then you get the Giants. And this is another game I went back and forth on, but they have Brian Burns, and this is a Brian Burns, we'll call it a Brian Burns revenge game, and we'll give the Giants the victory there. So heading into the bye, they are now 4-6, get some much-needed rest, as this schedule does not get much easier. You look at the next couple games, you got 4 straight playoff teams in a row. Starting off with the Chiefs, the Super Bowl, 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. That one's going to be a loss. Then you get your first of 2 games against the Buccaneers. And that one is going to be, I'm giving them a loss on this one. Again, the Buccaneers I really like what they did this offseason. We'll talk about them as well tomorrow. And then they get the Eagles. Not any easier. Going on the road to face the Eagles in Week 14. Pencil that in for another loss. I love what the Eagles did. We talked about everyone in the NFC East in the last week's portion of the NFL previews. And same thing with the Cowboys. The Cowboys got a little worse, but they're still better than the Panthers. So that is now a 5-game losing streak. Brutal. They go from 4-6 now to 4-10. And they get a game against the Cardinals. And this is like I said, there's only a few games I went back and forth on. This was one of them. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray, if he is playing 100% through this season, I love the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. That's going to be great. But I'm giving the Panthers the win on this one. I think this is one of those games that they could, it could be an underdog and eke it out. You don't want to lose 6 in a row as the season goes on. So I'm going to give this one to the Panthers. And then they close out against the Bucs again. Bucs and the Falcons, 2 straight division games. Right now they're sitting at 5-10. The division's still technically in play the way that I have it. Although not after these 2 games. I have them dropping the last 2. Like I said, the division's still in play, so these are going to matter. Everyone's going their hardest. I got the Bucs and the Falcons both beating them to close out the season. And I have the Panthers finishing at 5-12, missing out on the playoffs. Slight improvement on the year. I think we're going to see a step from Bryce Young. It's not going to be enough because that offensive line is still really bad. That offensive line is awful. And I'm not, again, that's really what's going to be holding this team back is the awful state of the offensive line. But bringing in the guard Hunt from the Dolphins. Robert Hunt is a huge add, and I think if they can continue to build this offensive line, and we get guys like Ike Ekwonu take a big step up, this Panthers team could be anywhere from 3 to 7 wins this year. And I've got them right there in the middle at 5. So that's where I got them, missing the playoffs at 5-12. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my predictions here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers and their offseason and their schedule ahead. But we are going to move on to the next NFL team. We're going to talk about the New Orleans Saints. We teased them a little bit against the Panthers here. We're going to go over their offseason here, and then we're just like the Panthers. We're going to go over their schedule. You already know that I got them going 1-1 at a minimum. So they're not going to go undefeated, and they're not going to lose every game. So let me know what you think. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.